My name is Elaine Holloway. When I was 13, my parents drove me to my aunt's house and never came back. 15 years later, they finally returned. Not with apologies, but with lawyers. Why? Because my aunt, the woman who raised me, left me everything. A $2 million estate, a historic home, and a truth I never saw coming. They thought they could manipulate me, erase the past, rewrite what they had abandoned. But they didn't know the woman I had become, or the woman who had raised me to fight with grace. If you've ever wondered whether blood really makes a family, you're not alone. This story might just change the way you see love, legacy, and what it truly means to be chosen. Subscribe now so you don't miss what happens next, or if life pulls you away, you can return and finish the story anytime. My first memory of being truly alone wasn't the day my parents left. It was the morning after. The silence in the house wasn't just quiet, it was loud, too loud. Like the world had turned its back and left me to hear it. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding a spoon, waiting for breakfast that never came. No footsteps, no coffee brewing, no voice calling my name, just me. And that heavy, awful silence. It was my Aunt Martha who showed up that afternoon. She didn't say much, didn't ask questions. She just walked in, looked around, saw the empty fridge, and said quietly, "Well, I guess we're making pancakes at my place." That's how it started. Not with fanfare, not with tears. Just with pancakes, maple syrup, and the gentlest smile I'd ever seen. Aunt Martha lived in a tiny one-bedroom cottage near the edge of town. She worked long hours at the public library, wore shoes a size too big, and had a coffee mug that said, "Don't rush me. I'm grieving 1993. She was funny in that way only older women can be without trying. Like when she told me, if someone ever offers you a shortcut in life, it probably leads to a ditch. I didn't understand most of her sayings at the time, but now I'd give anything to hear one more. She didn't talk badly about my parents, not once. She never even asked why they left. She just gave me space to exist. And slowly, I did. At school, kids whispered. Some teachers looked at me like I was a charity case. But Aunt Martha never let me feel small when I brought home a B in science. She taped it to the fridge and said, "That's one B closer to brilliant." When I was too embarrassed to wear hand-me-downs, she stitched little sunflowers on the sleeves. Suddenly, I was the girl with the flowers, not the girl with the missing parents. Every Christmas, she gave me something practical wrapped in humor. A winter coat with a note, "So you don't freeze to death, you dramatic little icicle." Socks with glitter thread, because every toe deserves a party. We had so little, but I never felt poor, and I never felt unloved. One night when I was 15, I came home crying. A girl at school had called me the throwaway kid. I didn't want dinner. Didn't want to talk. Aunt Martha just sat next to me holding a bowl of mashed potatoes. She didn't force a speech. She just handed me a spoon and said, "Eat first, cry after. Trust me, tears on potatoes ruin the salt." I laughed. Through tears. And she grinned like she'd won a small battle. If you've ever had someone like that in your life, someone who chose you, loved you even when they didn't have to, then you know what I mean when I say she saved me. Not with money, not with lectures, but with presence. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if she hadn't come. Would I have grown bitter, cold? Would I have become the version of me that my parents believed was disposable? But Aunt Martha didn't let that happen. She taught me how to use a library card, how to patch a sock, how to walk into a room with my head up, even if my shoes were secondhand. She didn't raise a victim. She raised someone who knew her worth. And that's why, years later, when the funeral was over and I found out what she'd left me, I couldn't stop shaking. Not because of the house, not even the money, but because in a locked drawer at the back of her desk was a letter with my name on it. She had planned everything. She'd seen the storm coming. And somehow, even after she was gone, she was still protecting me. If you've ever lost someone who meant everything to you, someone who didn't have to love you but did anyway, you'll understand what comes next. And if this story reminds you of someone, or makes you feel something stirred deep inside, consider subscribing, so you can come back anytime and hear more stories that speak to the heart. Sometimes people ask, how could your parents just leave? And honestly, I wish I had an answer, because I still don't know. They didn't fight with each other. They didn't yell at me. They didn't even seem sad. One day, I came home from school and the house was quiet. Too quiet. There were no shoes by the door, no dishes in the sink, no TV playing Dad's crime shows on low volume, just a note on the kitchen table, folded, no envelope. It said, "We're sorry, we can't give you the life you deserve. You'll understand one day." No name, no explanation, no promise to return, and just like that, they were gone. Later, I found out they had gone to a notary and signed away their parental rights. Apparently, there's a legal form for that. They didn't even contest it. They got a small payout from the state, some kind of financial relief for giving me up. I was 13. 13 is when you're supposed to be worrying about locker combinations and school dances, not whether your birth certificate still means anything. When Aunt Martha arrived and took me in, she didn't say anything bad about them, but she did ask for the papers. She kept them in a fireproof folder under her bed. I saw them once. Official. Stamps, signatures, dates. My mother's handwriting. Still neat. Still cold. For years I had this dream that they were kidnapped, or in witness protection, or had some noble reason for disappearing. But the truth was simpler and crueler. They left. Because I was inconvenient. Because life got hard. Because love to them came with terms and conditions. I remember sitting on Aunt Martha's porch one night, wrapped in her oversized cardigan, watching moths hit the porch light like they didn't know it would burn them. I asked her, "Do you think they ever loved me?" She stirred her tea quietly, then said, "Some people confuse love with ownership. If they left when love required work, maybe it wasn't love at all." That stayed with me. At school, Mother's Day was the worst. The teachers would have us write letters to our moms. I always wrote mine to Aunt Martha. One year, I asked if I could skip it. She said, "You can, or you can write something real. Your truth matters too." So I wrote, "To the woman who stayed, thank you for not giving me away like an old coat." She taped it to the fridge. We laughed about it later. She said it was the most aggressively honest thank you note she'd ever received, but the pain lingered. I didn't talk about my parents much. People either pitied me or tried to fix it. Some said, "Maybe they'll come back one day." Others, "You should forgive them. They're still your parents." But how do you forgive someone who didn't say goodbye? How do you heal from a wound that never got the chance to scab? Aunt Martha never pushed me to feel better. She just let me be. She gave me small things to hold on to. Sunday breakfasts with too many blueberries. Notes in my lunchbox that said, "You are exactly enough." Evenings reading library books aloud with British accents so bad, we'd both end up in tears from laughing. She didn't try to replace anyone. She just showed up. And in time, the hole they left stopped feeling like a wound and started feeling like a scar. A quiet reminder that sometimes the people who bring you into the world aren't the ones who teach you how to live in it. If this story echoes something you've lived, a silence you still remember, a goodbye you never got, know this: you are not alone. You are not broken. You are not the choices other people made when they walked away. And if you want to hear more stories that speak the quiet truths we carry, feel free to subscribe. You can always come back here. I'll be waiting. She died on a Thursday. It was raining, but not the dramatic movie kind. Just that slow, steady drizzle that makes everything feel heavier. Like the sky was grieving with me. Aunt Martha had been fighting quietly, never complained, never let me see her scared. She'd always say, "Sweetheart, if it's my time, I hope I go wearing clean socks and with no dishes in the sink." And she did. I found her in her favorite chair, an open book on her lap, a blanket pulled up to her chest. The room still smelled like chamomile tea. I didn't cry right away. Not because it didn't hurt, but because some losses don't come with sound. They just sit inside you, like a stone you swallow by accident. The funeral was small, just a few neighbors, some women from the library, and me. I wore the same dress she bought me for prom. She'd always said, "You'll get more use out of it than you think." She was right. Again, the will reading happened 3 days later. I expected it to be simple. Maybe the house, a few savings. But when the lawyer opened the folder, he took a long breath and said, "She left everything to you: the house, the estate, the investments, including a private fund totaling just over $2 million. I stared at him. $2 million. Aunt Martha never even bought name brand cereal. He slid over a sealed envelope with my name in her handwriting. I didn't open it right away. My hands were shaking too much. I just sat there feeling like the room had tilted sideways. Not because of the money, but because even after death she'd found a way to remind me, "You are not alone. You are not forgotten." But life rarely lets you breathe for long, because 2 days later, my phone rang. The voice on the other end was warm, familiar, almost rehearsed. "Hey, kiddo, it's Dad." I froze. My first thought wasn't anger. It was confusion. And then a flood of disbelief. He talked like nothing had happened. Asked how I'd been. Said he and Mom were passing through town. Wanted to see me. Said they heard about Martha. I didn't ask how. I didn't have to. They showed up the next morning, not with flowers, not with grief, but with a man in a suit, their lawyer. They said they had concerns, that I was young and vulnerable, that the will might have been written under emotional manipulation, that maybe Aunt Martha had pressured me. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the audacity was just unbelievable. They hadn't spoken to me in 15 years. not a call, not a card. And now they were here, smiling like bad actors, asking for coffee, while suggesting I wasn't of sound mind to handle my own inheritance. Dad put a hand on my shoulder and said, "We're family. We can figure this out together." It took everything in me not to pull away, not to scream. Instead, I smiled and said, "You're right, we are family. That's why I know exactly what you're here for." The lawyer cleared his throat as if trying. To make the moment more civil, they offered to help manage the estate to take some of the pressure off, even suggested we move back in together. Start fresh. As if the past was a room we could just close the door on, I didn't argue, didn't fight. Just stood up, walked to the bookshelf, and pulled down Aunt Martha's fireproof folder. Inside were copies of everything. The will, the notarized documents, and most importantly, the papers they had signed 15 years ago, legally giving me up. I handed it to their lawyer. His face turned the color of wet paper. My parents didn't say much after that. Mom muttered something about needing time to process. Dad looked at the floor. Neither of them said they were sorry. They left without even finishing their coffee. And me. I finally opened Aunt Martha's letter. The first line said, "If they come back, don't be surprised. Love leaves quietly, but greed always knocks twice. If you're still with me, thank you. If this story resonates, if you've ever had someone show up only when it benefits them, you're not alone. And if you'd like to hear how this story unfolds, consider subscribing so you can come back whenever you need a reminder that truth has a way of rising, no matter how long it's been buried." I thought the awkward reunion would be the last of it. A tense visit, some fake smiles, a quiet exit. I was wrong. 1 week later, I got a letter from a law office. Big envelope, thick paper, too formal to be anything kind. They were suing me. The claim that Aunt Martha had manipulated me, that I was not her legal heir, and the kicker that because I was adopted informally, I had no blood claim to the estate. I stared at the pages in disbelief. They were digging up every legal loophole they could find, trying to paint her as unstable, and me as undeserving. The woman who raised me, fed me, protected me from their abandonment, now they were calling her unfit. Their argument hinged on one thing: biology. They said, "You're not her child by law. You were never officially adopted. This inheritance belongs to us." As if love came with DNA requirements, their lawyers sent statements to local papers, suggesting that Aunt Martha had been secretive and possibly mentally unwell, that I'd taken advantage of an elderly woman. They even hinted that I had forged documents, that the gossip spread like wildfire. I'd walk into the grocery store and feel eyes on me, whispers behind shelves. A man at the gas station muttered, "Must be nice, getting rich off your aunt's death." I stopped going out. For a while, I thought about just giving up, letting them have it. What good was a mansion if it felt like a prison? But then, I walked into Aunt Martha's old sewing room. Everything was still there. The fabric swatches, her little jars of buttons, the pincushion shaped like a tomato, and taped to the wall, a faded quote, "Truth doesn't panic, lies do." I sat on the floor and cried, not because I was scared, but because I remembered who raised me. A woman who read court cases for fun, who triple-labeled her spice rack, who once made a librarian cry with a perfectly worded complaint letter. She hadn't just written a will. She had built a fortress. My own lawyer, Mr. Keating, a calm man with tired eyes and a voice like a Sunday sermon's, mild as he laid out her plan. "Your aunt may not have filed an adoption through the county, but she documented everything. Letters, statements, video recordings. She even had 2 witnesses from the time your parents left." He pulled out a thick binder, and I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: relief, and something even stronger, resolve. They didn't stop, though. They tried to force a court-ordered inspection of the house, claiming there might be missing family property. A week later, I came home to find the garden gate broken, the mailbox pried open, the shed lock clipped. Nothing was stolen, but everything felt touched, invaded. I called the sheriff, filed a report, but deep down I knew who had done it, even if the law couldn't prove it. Then came the worst part. They went after her name. My parents began telling people that Aunt Martha had brainwashed me, that she turned me against them, that she was a bitter old spinster who poisoned me with lies. But what they didn't realize was this: every lie they told about her only made me love her more, because I remembered the truth. The nights she stayed up sewing holes in my backpack, the way she left the porch light on, even if I was 5 minutes late, the time she gave her last $20 to a neighbor who'd lost his job and told me, "We don't count what we give. We count what we keep, and if it's too much, we give more." She wasn't perfect, but she was good. So incredibly fiercely good. And they couldn't take that away with ink in courtrooms. One night, I stood in the living room, surrounded by boxes of legal files and newspaper clippings, and I whispered, "They have no idea who they're dealing with, do they?" It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about dignity, hers and mine. If you've ever had someone try to rewrite your story to erase someone you loved, just to claim something they didn't earn, I hope you know this. Your truth matters, even if they shout louder, even if they have lawyers. And if you've come this far in my story, thank you. Feel free to subscribe if you'd like to hear the rest. Sometimes we just need a quiet place to remember that loyalty doesn't end at a courtroom door. Mr. Keating, the lawyer, called me one morning and said, "You might want to sit down for this." I laughed and said, "Unless you're about to tell me my parents joined a monastery, I think I can handle it." He didn't laugh, which meant I really did need to sit down. He handed me a folder thicker than a phone book. Inside was something I never expected to see. A legal adoption certificate, filed 13 years ago, signed, stamped, sealed by the county. Aunt Martha had officially adopted me. She just never told me. No big speech, no dramatic paperwork on the fridge, just done. Quietly, thoroughly. She knew you might need it. Someday, Mr. Keating said. She didn't want you to ever feel like you were second best. I stared at the document for minutes, reading my name next to hers. She hadn't just raised me, she'd claimed me completely. Legally, emotionally, all in. I cried, not the loud kind, the kind that happens when a truth finally lands, years after it was planted. But that wasn't all. At the bottom of the folder was another document, one I'd never seen before. It was a copy of a financial transaction record. It showed that 15 years ago, my parents received a direct transfer just over $40,000 from a private agency. The note in the ledger said, "Relinquishment of parental rights finalized." They didn't just leave, they got paid to leave. My knees gave out. For years, I had tried to tell myself stories. Maybe they were overwhelmed. Maybe they had no choice. Maybe life broke them. But no, they made a deal, and I was the deal. Mr. Keating sat quietly while I absorbed it. Then he pulled out one last thing. "A USB drive," he said. "This one, I think she meant for you to hear in your own time. But given what's happening, it might be the time now." I took it home, plugged it in, clicked the only file. It was a voice recording. The quality was old, a little scratchy, but I recognized the voice instantly. Aunt Martha, she sounded younger, stronger, and furious. "I don't care how much they want. I will not let that child go into the system. They walked away. They sold her out. And now they want more. No, she is mine now. She is safe. And if they come back, I want this on record. They are not welcome. They are not family." The clip ended with a long pause, then a softer voice. "She doesn't know I'm doing this. She thinks the world is still kind. But one day, if she finds out the truth, I want her to know I fought for her." I played that clip 5 times, maybe 10. Each time I cried differently. She had known everything, and she had still smiled through it, still made pancakes, still let me believe in hope. That night, I walked through the house, her house, and felt her in every corner. The sewing machine in the closet, the notes in the margins of her books, the way she always folded the ends of toilet paper into little triangles. Said it made life feel just a bit more hotel. I stood in the kitchen where she used to hum old gospel tunes while frying eggs, and whispered, "I know now. I really know." The next day, we brought all of it to court. The certificate, the transaction, the recording. Their lawyer looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. My parents didn't say a word, not one, and honestly, that silence felt like the first honest thing they'd given me in years. If you've ever had someone love you in secret, fight for you behind closed doors, prepare for storms you didn't even know were coming. Then maybe you know what this feels like. It's not just justice. It's something deeper. Proof that love can be quiet and still be fierce. If this story has stirred something in you, a memory, a truth, a person you miss, you're always welcome here. And if you'd like to hear the rest of what unfolded, feel free to subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered, especially the ones told in whispers. I used to think the worst thing my parents ever did was leave, but I was wrong. The worst thing they did was come back. After court, I hoped it was over, that they would disappear again, this time for good. But greed doesn't go quietly. A week later, a neighbor knocked on my door. She looked nervous, said 2 strangers were in my backyard, talking to each other, arguing. I checked the camera feed. It was them. My parents whispering near the garden shed, the one Aunt Martha used to keep locked. I called the police, filed for a restraining order, and tried to breathe, but it didn't end there. That same week, a local reporter showed up asking questions. She'd received an anonymous tip claiming Aunt Martha had hidden money offshore, that the estate might be fraudulent. I knew exactly where the tip came from. I told her she could come in, but only if she stayed for tea. She accepted over chamomile and lemon cookies. I gave her a copy of the adoption papers, the financial records, and of course, the recording. She didn't write the story they wanted. She wrote the truth, and that's when everything cracked open. It started with a call from Mr. Keating. "We've done some digging," he said, "and your parents. They're in debt, heavy debt. Multiple states, collections, one foreclosure. They weren't here to reconnect. They were drowning, and I was the lifeboat, but that wasn't even the biggest shock. 2 days later, a woman I'd never met showed up on my porch. Maybe early 30s, eyes like mine. She introduced herself, then said something I wasn't ready for. "I think we share a mother." At first I thought it was some mistake, or a scam, but she showed me documents, photos, even a birth certificate. Turns out, before I was born, my mother had an affair with a man she worked with. She got pregnant. Instead of coming clean, she gave the baby up quietly. No one in the family knew. She kept it hidden. The woman, her name was Kara, had been searching for answers for years. Found Mom's name on a background check, then saw the article from the reporter. That's how she found me. I didn't know whether to hug her or collapse. She wasn't here for money. She just wanted the truth, to know where she came from, why she was left behind. And standing there, I realized something strange. My mother had abandoned both of us, just at different times, in different ways. Later that night, I found an old photo in one of Aunt Martha's scrapbooks. It was of Mom, younger, and behind her, a man I didn't recognize. Kara confirmed it was her father. The man Mom had been with. Aunt Martha had known. Of course she had. She always knew more than she let on. Then came the final twist. A knock on the door. 2 officers, badges, not polite. "Are you the sole inheritor of the Martha D. Holloway estate?" one asked. I nodded. "We're conducting an investigation. There have been reports of attempted break-ins, financial fraud, and property tampering. We'd like to ask you some questions about your parents." Turns out, someone had filed an anonymous police report months ago, describing suspicious activity around Aunt Martha's home before her death. The voice on the recording matched my father. He had visited the neighborhood multiple times, claimed he was checking up on family, but residents had reported him peering into windows, trying doorknobs. One neighbor even caught him taking photos of mail left on the porch. And now that the estate had become public knowledge, law enforcement took it seriously. What started as a civil dispute was now a criminal investigation. The officers assured me I wasn't a target, but I would need to testify if charges were filed. I closed the door after they left, and for the first time in months I laughed. Not a happy laugh, not bitter either, just the kind of laugh that comes when you finally realize the people who tried to ruin you ended up ruining themselves. If you've ever been betrayed, used, lied to, I hope you know, the truth always catches up, even if it takes years. And when it does, you don't need to yell or fight. You just need to stand still and let the storm pass around you. If this part of the story gave you chills or maybe just a little peace, feel free to subscribe. I'd love to share how it all ends. Sometimes the truth isn't loud, it's just patient. Some goodbyes happen once, others echo. The court case was fading. My parents had disappeared again, this time under police watch. The media had moved on. And for the first time in weeks, the house was quiet, too quiet. So I did what I had been avoiding Aunt Martha's hope chest. It was tucked in the attic under a faded quilt. The same quilt she used to cover me with during storms. Inside were small boxes tied with string, photos, journals, holiday cards from neighbors, and at the very bottom, a bundle of envelopes yellowed with time. They were all addressed to my parents, postmarked from the year they left. The first one was dated just 3 weeks after they disappeared. I opened it with shaking hands. "Dear Michael and Elise, I don't know what happened. I don't know why you left, but she cries every night. She asks for you. She still thinks you're coming back. Please, if you can't come home, at least write. Let her hear from you. Let her know she wasn't a mistake." I sat on the attic floor, heart pounding. There were 5 more letters, each one more desperate than the last. One ended with, "I'm begging you, you don't have to raise her, but please, don't erase her." None had ever been opened. Each envelope had been returned, marked, refused, returned to sender. They hadn't just left. They'd rejected any attempt to reconnect. Even Aunt Martha's grace wasn't enough for them for a long time. I just sat there staring at the pile of returned mail, feeling both loved and gutted. She had fought so hard to give me closure, to give them a chance to be better, and they chose silence. Deliberate silence. Then, I saw a smaller envelope at the very bottom, unopened. My name on it. No stamp. I opened it slowly. It was the last thing she ever wrote to me. Her handwriting was softer here, more careful. My darling girl, if you're reading this, then I'm no longer there to hold your hand through what comes next. But if I've done my job right, you won't need me to. You'll already know how strong you are. I wiped my eyes and kept reading. I wish I could tell you that people always do the right thing, but you've already learned that they don't. Still, what we do in response is where the real story is written. And then came the line I will never forget. You were not abandoned. You were chosen. You are my daughter in every way that matters. Blood may start a family, but love builds it. I couldn't read anymore. I pressed the letter to my chest, and for the first time since the funeral, I sobbed, not from pain, but from a grief so complete it cracked open something inside me. She had known everything, and still she chose love. Over bitterness, that night I took all 6 of those returned letters, tied them together with twine, and placed them in the fireplace. I didn't burn them out of anger. I burned them because they didn't deserve to carry her words anymore. And as I watched them curl into ash, I whispered, I forgive you. Not for them, but for me, because carrying hate, even when it's earned, is just a slower kind of poison. A few days later, I got a message from Kara, my half-sister. She said she'd started therapy, that learning the truth had broken her, but also freed her. We made plans to meet again, no expectations, just coffee, and maybe a future neither of us saw coming. And somehow, in that quiet, I finally felt peace. Not because the past had changed, but because I had. If someone in your life ever made you feel unworthy, or if you've spent years carrying a silence, that wasn't yours to bear. I hope you know this. Your story doesn't end with their absence. It begins with your choice to move forward, and if you want to keep hearing stories like this, ones that honor the quiet, strong people who choose love when they could have chosen hate, you're welcome here anytime. Feel free to subscribe so we can keep finding truth, one story at a time. Some people say revenge is sweet, but for me, peace tastes better. I never saw my parents again, not in person. Their case dragged on quietly in the background. Some fines, some probation, a few short news headlines no one paid attention to, but I let it go because I had something better. A house filled with memories, a sister I never expected, and the echo of a woman's voice who had loved me loud in silence for years. After everything settled, I did something Aunt Martha would have. Smiled at I adopted a cat. A grumpy little thing with a bent ear and one eye. I named him Henry. The house didn't feel so empty anymore then. I started volunteering, just small things, at first reading at the local library, tutoring kids after school. But one day I met a girl, 8 years old, shy, carried all her belongings. In a plastic grocery bag, she reminded me of someone. Me. I talked to the director at the shelter, asked what they needed. She said, honestly, everything, but especially space, somewhere these kids can just be safe. That night, I sat in Aunt Martha's old chair, the one with the slightly uneven leg, and stared out the window, and I knew what I wanted to do. 2 months later, I signed the paperwork. The house, the big, freaky, beautiful house, became the Holloway Haven, a transitional home for kids in foster care. Not a system, a space, with books, warm meals, and quiet places to cry if they needed to. I kept Aunt Martha's sewing room just as it was, taught a few of the kids how to stitch a pillow. They laughed at how bad I was at it. She would have loved that. Henry the cat became everyone's unofficial therapist, grumpy, but loyal. The trust fund Aunt Martha left. I kept enough to live simply. The rest went into a foundation in her name, offering scholarships to kids who aged out of the system because no child should turn 18 and feel like the world stopped caring. Kara visited often. She started painting again, something she hadn't done since she was a teen. We'd sit on the porch with lemonade, watching the kids play tag in the yard. She once looked at me and said, funny, isn't it? We both came from the same woman, but ended up being raised by strangers. I smiled and said, not strangers, just the right ones. One night, a little boy asked me, are you the mom here? I laughed. Then I said something I didn't know I believed until the words left my mouth. I guess I'm something like that. He nodded, then ran off, as if it made perfect sense. And maybe it did. Because family isn't about blood. It's about presence, about who shows up, who stays, who chooses you again and again. Aunt Martha chose me, and now I get to keep choosing others. Not to erase the pain, but to make sure that pain leads somewhere better. If you've stayed with me this far, thank you. Not just for listening to my story, but for holding space for people like Martha and girls like me. Maybe you've had someone love you like that. Maybe you are that person for someone else. Either way, I hope you remember this. You are not defined by who left. You are defined by who stood beside you when they did. And if this story meant something to you, even just a little, feel free to subscribe. There are more stories to come. Not always perfect, but honest, and maybe, just maybe, full of the kind of love this world still needs more of. As someone who spent years studying stories of loss, betrayal, and redemption, this one still lingers. It reminds us that sometimes the deepest wounds don't come from strangers. They come from the people who were supposed to protect us. But here's what's extraordinary. She didn't let the betrayal define her. She didn't seek revenge with bitterness. She chose something far more powerful: peace, purpose, and the quiet, radical act of love. Because in the end, what is family? It's not the blood in your veins. It's the people who stay when things fall apart. It's the ones who love you without condition and fight for you behind closed doors when no one is watching. And now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had someone unexpected become your true family? Or maybe you've been that person for someone else? Share your thoughts in the comments. Someone out there may need to hear your story. And if this touched your heart, if you believe the world needs more stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because what we build here isn't just videos. It's a community, a place where the quiet, untold truths finally have a voice. And sometimes, those voices echo louder than we ever imagined.